are you?
Doing great, Richard. Great to see you.
Likewise, thank you for speaking with me today. I appreciate it.
My
Um,
pleasure.
why don't we start off with your name, your role, and your journey to the world of education?
Yeah, sure thing. My name is Dr. William Mellman. Most people call me Will. I am sort of transitioned from being a high school principal to a ninth grade biology teacher. And I sort of came about, I've had a lot of different roles in the past. I actually, in some ways, have come full circle. I started out my career in education as a teacher's aide at a school for kids with autism, and then at night weekends did like SAT and MCAT prep classes for Caplet, and sort of framed my career a little bit and sort of student centered and differentiation.
Yeah,
Always, I think when we talk about equity, I think it comes for a lot of us from just a sense of fairness, which I think I always had. Let's try to make a more fair, more just society. And so it's always been a driver of what I do. And so I was a science teacher. Read some books, reflected, improved my practice. Test scores go up. Thought, hey, well, let me try my hand at leadership and make a difference outside my science classroom. And did pretty well at it. Was able to I think make some positive changes as an assistant principal, then an elementary school principal, and then as a high school principal. Sort of taking a student centered, but also a collaborative approach as far as staff are concerned. Really, kind of listening to voices, making sure that the best ideas win. And I think if you want your staff to treat your students well, you have to teach your staff well, and so I sort of believe in that. But was able to see some gains, at the elementary level and then at the high school level. At Great Oaks Legacy Charter School in Newark, really just dedicated team. Truly cared about and loved kids, and I think on some level everybody in education does. The work's too hard to go into it unless you really want to make a difference in the lives of young people.
right.
But I think part of what I sort of feel like I ended up doing in both of those school leadership roles was take that love that the staff had for kids and sort of channel it into excellent pedagogy. Let's take how much we really care about kids and just make sure that shows through, not just in the going to their basketball games or supporting their drama, their theater programs at night or whatever else we're doing for them, but making sure that we're really at the top of their games in the classroom too, setting them up for tests that way. I saw some growth in test scores. The last few years have been really, really challenging.
Mm,
Um, and I, kind of taking a step back, and like a lot of us did during the pandemic. And is this what I want to do long term? And it was a lot. A lot of work goes into it. Is 14-hour days week after week. I
mhm.
have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old at home, and I live across the street from a high school that really needed science teachers. And I think for the sake of me and my family, I decided to take a step back, and I'll be on the same school calendar as my kids, and I'm going all out, being the best teacher as I can be. But I think, um, but also hoping to preserve um, the rest of my identity a little bit better than I was able to as a high school principal the last couple of years too.
Yeah, sure. And we can all definitely appreciate the need for balance, especially now. I'm a parent of a 5-year-old as well, and now more than ever, I feel like it can be pretty challenging to strike the right balance, a healthy balance, where you're showing up authentically and fully and present as a parent, but also tending to your career and the things you're passionate about. So, can certainly understand that. As a high school principal, you were able to increase graduation rates despite challenges such as the pandemic and remote schooling. Talk to me about how you did that.
Yeah, and, it's really a team effort, and I give a lot of credit to my staff. Really meeting students where they were, when they're remote, what do they need to just log in online? Are we going to be on a 3-way call with them in an internet service provider until they can get connected?
Sure.
Do they need that wake up call to wake up in the morning and log in, which maybe they hadn't before? Kind of sticking with them through that, um, and then just really taking a relationship driven approach. I think relationships is what's going to get kids across into the finish line, and it's a lot of back and forth. A lot of kids who are thinking about leaving, thinking about doing different things with their lives that aren't necessarily as productive, and is really just one conversation at a time. taking that approach, whether it's with the student, whether it's with their family, their aunts, uncles, grandparents, kind of whatever it took.
Mm.
Uh, and I think we did take a step, and I think like what do we want for kids? When I was in high school, I didn't take 4 years of history, and I still graduated. And I think just taking an approach to graduation requirements that's still in line with the state standards of what students need to graduate, but doesn't penalize students for going to our school. So the New Jersey requires 3 years, 3 years of history. You know what? You pass 3 years of history, you get to graduate.
Mm.
Nobody wins when kids don't graduate on time. I find there are some exceptions. There are kids who repeat 10th grade and go on to graduate and have great lives, but those are the exceptions. And I think through experience, I've learned, and the data I think backs us up here that when kids repeat a grade, they're less likely to graduate.
Yeah.
And so I think it's taking a more sort of customized, differentiated approach,
Yeah.
and then just putting in the time to be on the phone with the kid and doing what it takes to get them there, and letting them know we care about them until they care for themselves to the
Yeah.
extent in their education.
How do you galvanize your faculty around that idea, right? Because look, the work of being educator is hard as it is, right? And then you're talking about getting kids across the finish line to graduate high school and on time, and then to persist in college, which I'd love to talk to you about a bit later on. But how do you like? What's that conversation with your faculty to keep them inspired, to keep them focused, to keep them urgent on the task at hand?
Yeah, I think this was, and I think we were all sort of learning as we go through the pandemic, and I think it's me and my leadership team were a little reflective. And I think at first, it was all right, we're coming. We were doing things. We have to do it for the kids. We're all about the kids. We're student centered. Now, anyone in education has been hearing that their whole careers, right? And so it's like, okay, now you're talking about me, which for better or worse, I had to put in probably more hours than maybe I should have, and we're asking them to do even more for kids. And I think at some point, people don't want to be martyrs, right? Necessarily. So I took a step back and like, hey, yes, we're all here for kids, and that's like the baseline. But then how are we showing up for our staff? And I think really, um, and you have to do it. You can't just say you care for your team. You care for your teachers and your staff if you don't, right? But I think that it's kind of counterintuitive. But I think we like rolled back some of that. We're all in it for kids language versus like, okay, what do you need? How can I support you,
Mm.
right? And so that you have sort of the mental and emotional energy to
Yeah.
support the kid. What was it for? I found to be a more helpful time.
Yeah. And I mentioned about this persistence idea, right? So educators across the country, schools across the country are trying to crack the code and think about and figure out rather how to set up the foundational conditions that will support students in their persistence in college, right? You have or you guys had I think a persistent rate, was it 5+ times that of a national average? Like how do you do that? Like where did you start? What sort of what did you focus on, and sort of what plan did you enact to get that to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think to give a lot of credit to sort of the Great Oaks network leadership for things they had already put in place. But I think if two things, if people are like watching this for advice on what to do, I think first, um, there's, we can all be like competitive sometimes, and sometimes I think school leaders can have a bit of an ego about getting kids into these like top name universities. I really want to get some kids to go into Harvard, and then we can just like put it on our school's website or whatever. And we really work with families to take a very different approach and say what's going to be the best college for this kid, for this student, financially, what's going to make the most sense, so they're not in debt and having to work a zillion hours, not going to be able to keep up with their studies. What's going to be best for this student as far as workload and challenge? Is going to a local school going to be better for this student? Because they'll have that support system, they'll have a family close by, or not. And I think it goes back. We people talk about differentiation, as a pedagogical mindset, but I think it really should encompass everything we do. as educators and educational leaders. And we had some students go to phenomenal colleges. Don't get me wrong, due to their incredible efforts. Um, but I think that that's sort of the key is to set kids up for success. The last thing we want is for somebody to drop out of college 2 3 years in, drowning in debt. Um, and with the price of college not going down anytime soon, I think it's especially important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we did. I think, and again, to give credit to the network leadership, is to just like allocate the resources. We have somebody whose whose full time job it is to continue to kind of be in touch with our alumni, right, and like keep tabs on them, how they're doing. And it's not always easy. Like a 20-year-old isn't necessarily gonna want to like be on the phone with their old high school counselor, you know. So it took some persistence on their part, but I think sort of a more wraparound approach is really helpful, especially for some colleges that don't really provide that.
Right. Right. So we are in the business of teaching and learning, and there are commonly held myths or beliefs about the work that we do. Sort of, what is a common myth about your work or about the work of leading schools, or about school leaders in the field of education that you've heard or have encountered?
We get paid the big bucks. It's one of them. No, and I think like I think that you can just kind of tell everybody do what to do, just set expectations and hold people accountable when they don't meet the expectations, and it just doesn't work. Like I think you just have to take a supportive stance. People don't. Most people don't enter education in the first place unless they're very internally motivated.
Yeah.
So it has to be a dialogue. It can't just be one way. Communication.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that's the biggest one for me.
And what are you most excited about for this upcoming school year?
I'm excited to be in a class with teenagers and like kids is like making a difference every day. Um, I love biology. I'm a bit of like a nerd about it, and I've become got like channeled my nerdiness towards like education research. But I'm excited to
Why
like
not?
see that different part of like try to see things pretty practically, but like to like roll up my sleeves again in that, and like I think it's almost like like tragic that like teachers don't get to observe all the great teaching that's happening around them.
Yeah.
But I've had a career in school leadership, and I've just gotten to see and learn from so many wonderful teachers, in a way that I think like I can't wait to like just bring it like in front of the classroom for kids, or not really even in front, right? Just to, side by side with students, as a learning and mastering material is great. And I think I'd be lying if I said I wasn't excited to have summers off again, and to have a
Added perk, right?
more balanced life, at least for now, man. And
Yeah.
like when they're older, I'll probably get back into it at some point, but for now, it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. Thank you again very much for spending some time with me today. And we look forward to sharing this across our platform. So thank you very much.
Hey, thanks so much for starting the series and for all the work you and Leverage do behind the scenes. It's
Of
such a
course,
great
thank you.
organization. Appreciate
I
it.
appreciate it. Thank you.